You are 20 years old and you don't know yet that this is the most important year of your life. Not because of what happens in it. Nothing happens in it. That's the point. It's a Tuesday. You've just gotten your first real paycheck, $2,340 after tax, from a job you'll barely remember in 5 years. You're sitting on the edge of your bed, laptop open, and you're doing something almost nobody does at 20. You're looking at the number and asking a question most people won't ask until they're 35, if ever. What do I want this money to become? 3 blocks away, at almost the exact same hour, Marcus is opening his own first paycheck. Same amount, give or take. Same age, same city, same kind of apartment, same blank future stretching out in front of him like a hallway with no doors yet. He doesn't ask your question, he asks a different one. What do I want tonight to feel like? This is not a story about a smart man and a foolish one. Marcus is not stupid. You are not special. You are two ordinary men who on one ordinary Tuesday quietly pointed yourselves in different directions. That's all a decade is. 1,000 ordinary Tuesdays pointed one way or another. You open a separate account that night and move $400 into it before you can talk yourself out of it. It has no name yet. You'll call it different things over the years. Emergency fund, then investments, then eventually just the account. But tonight, it's just a number that makes you feel slightly less free and slightly more solid at the same time. Marcus orders sushi he can't really afford yet because the delivery app doesn't ask if you can afford it, and puts the rest on a card that will, very quietly, start charging him 22% on whatever he doesn't pay back. Neither of you feels anything unusual. That's what no one tells you about the beginning of a decade. It never announces itself. There's no music. There's no signpost. You go to sleep the same night in apartments 3 blocks apart, and you both wake up Wednesday feeling completely, forgettably normal. By 21, the shape of things is already setting, like concrete nobody remembers pouring. You've automated it now. A percentage that leaves your checking account before you ever see it, before you can miss it. You tell yourself it's temporary, a habit you're trying on, and in a sense, you're right, it is a habit. You just don't know yet that it's the only one that will matter. Marcus has a system too, though he'd never call it that. His system is say yes. Yes to the trip, yes to the round of drinks, yes to the new phone when the old one still works fine. Each yes feels small. Each yes feels like the correct decision for a 21-year-old to make, because what else is your 20s for if not this? You go out less than he does. You notice this. You feel some weekends a small, ugly pinch of missing out, watching stories of a rooftop bar, a spontaneous flight, a night that looks from the outside like the whole entire point of being young. You don't know yet that Marcus feels a version of the same pinch aimed the opposite way. A low hum of unease every time he checks his balance before it hits zero, a feeling he's very good at not looking at directly. You are both 21. You are both, in your own way, already a little bit afraid. Neither of you would call it that. By 23, something shifts, though it's easy to miss if you're not looking closely. You get a bonus, not huge, $3,000, and instead of a trip or a new wardrobe, you split it without much drama. Half into the account, half into something you started reading about at night instead of scrolling. An index fund, a word that sounded boring a year ago and now sounds quietly like a kind of armor. Marcus gets a bonus too that same season, almost identical in size. His goes to a weekend in Tulum with 3 friends, a rooftop, a drink at golden hour that costs what you spent on dinner tonight. You see the photo, you feel a pinch, and it isn't envy exactly. It's the specific adult ache of watching someone spend a thing you're choosing not to.
Here is what the photo doesn't show. It doesn't show that this is the first year it's cost you something real to say no. That $11,200 sitting in your account doesn't photograph well, doesn't prove to anyone that you were 23 and alive. And it doesn't show what the trip cost Marcus either. 3 weeks later, when the card statement arrives and he pays the minimum and tells himself he'll catch it up next month, he's spending a currency you can't see yet. His margin, his ability to absorb being wrong later when it matters more. By 24, Marcus gets a promotion, a good one, And here's where it would be easy for the story to turn into a lesson, so let's be precise about what actually happens instead. He doesn't waste it. He upgrades. A better apartment, a car that isn't held together by hope, a wardrobe that finally matches the job title on his LinkedIn. Every single choice is defensible. That's what makes lifestyle creep so difficult to see from the inside. It never feels like a mistake in the moment it's made. It only becomes visible later, stacked all at once, the way you only notice a staircase once you're forced to look down it. You get a smaller raise that same year. You don't upgrade. You increase the automated percentage by 2 points instead, and you feel almost nothing when you do it, which is itself the whole trick. 2 years ago, this took willpower. Now it barely takes a decision. 25 is when the doubt gets loud for the first time. Not about the money, but about the math you did to earn it. You do the math one night, an idle, dangerous kind of math, and you realize that at this rate, by 30, you'll have built something real. Not rich, not free, but real. And in the same 5 minutes, you scroll past Marcus at a rooftop party in a jacket that cost what you spent on groceries last month, laughing in a way that looks from the outside like a man with absolutely nothing to prove and nothing to fear. What if he's right and I'm wrong? What if the account, the discipline, the 1,000 small no's? What if it's not wisdom at all, just fear wearing a spreadsheet as a disguise? This is the part of the decade nobody warned you about. Not the sacrifice itself. You were ready for that. The part nobody warned you about is that the sacrifice, for years, produces no visible evidence that it was worth it. Marcus's choices pay out immediately, in experience, in status, in the currency of a good story. Yours pay out later, in a currency that doesn't even have a name yet. You keep going anyway, not because you're certain, because you already started, and stopping now would waste the version of you that already paid the price. 26 is the hardest year. Not because anything goes wrong, because nothing does, for either of you, and that's exactly what makes it unbearable. Marcus talks about a car upgrade at dinner, financed over 6 years because the monthly payment isn't that bad. You nod. You don't say anything. What would you even say? I think you're making a mistake to a man who by every visible measure is winning. Because he is winning. That's the part that keeps you up. You go home that night and sit with a feeling that doesn't have a clean name. Not envy exactly, something closer to doubt about your own life, which is worse. You check the account, $47,000. It should feel like something. It mostly feels like a number on a screen that has cost you 3 years of Tulums, of rooftop bars, of the small easy yeses that make up what people call a life. You don't pull the money out, not because you're brave, because you've built something more useful than willpower. You've built distance. The habit runs without you now. It doesn't ask you your permission.
27 is a good year for you. A raise that actually moves things. Not life-changing, but real enough that stacked on 3 years of quiet compounding, the account clears $80,000 without you ever consciously deciding to sprint. It's a different kind of year for Marcus. The 6-year car payment sits next to his rent, next to the credit card that never quite gets to zero, in a rhythm that starts to feel less like choices and more like weather he doesn't control. He's not reckless. He's not a cautionary tale in the way people like to imagine. No rock bottom, no dramatic collapse. Just a slow tightening, month over month. A man running slightly faster each year to stay in the same place. Then the company does layoffs. Marcus survives them, but for 2 weeks he doesn't know if he will. And for 2 weeks he does the math you did at 25, except his math has a different ending. 3 weeks of expenses and savings, a car payment that doesn't pause because you're scared, a version of freedom that turns out, under pressure, to have been rented the whole time, not owned. He understands for the first time what it actually means to have no space to absorb a shock. Not comfort, not luxury, just the ability to be wrong about something without it costing you everything. He mentions it to you weeks later, almost sideways, the way people finally say a thing once it's safely over. You don't lecture him. You never have in 8 years of this, because you understood something early. The point was never to be right. You just tell him it sounds like it was terrifying and mean it. He keeps his job, but something in him doesn't fully relax again. He cuts up the card twice before it actually sticks. The first attempt lasts 6 weeks before a rough month puts a new one in his wallet. The second time, it holds. He starts moving $50 into an account of his own, almost embarrassed by how small it is. It isn't much, it isn't you, but it's the first real crack in say yes. You, meanwhile, keep going to a job that's honestly a little boring, in an apartment that's honestly a little small, still not sure, even now, even past $80,000, if any of this was the right call. That uncertainty never fully leaves. It's not that the doubt resolves, it's that you keep moving anyway, underneath it. 28 is when the gap stops being a feeling and starts being a fact, not a dramatic one. A friend gets engaged, there's a group trip to celebrate, and you say yes without doing math first, an easy, thoughtless yes, the kind Marcus used to say without thinking. And you notice, almost with surprise, that it doesn't hurt. The money is just there. Not endless, just available in a way that stops feeling remarkable, specifically because it stopped being rare. Marcus says yes to the same trip. He does math first now, checking a balance before he answers instead of after. He goes, he always goes, but going costs him something now that it used to cost him nothing, and for the first time you watch him feel that cost instead of ignoring it the way you used to feel yours at 23. This is the part of the decade that finally makes the earlier years make sense. Not because you were right and he was wrong, but because the currency each of you spent all along has finally come due. You spent comfort for years on something you couldn't see or touch. He spent margin for years on something he could see and touch and post a photo of every single time. At 28, you can finally see both bills side by side. 29, you change jobs, a real jump this time, the kind you can only make because you weren't one missed paycheck from panic. There's a moment in the negotiation when the recruiter names a number lower than you expected, and instead of the small flinch of panic you'd have felt 5 years ago, you just say, calmly, that it doesn't quite work for you, and wait. 3 days later, they come back higher. That's the whole difference this decade bought you, compressed into one phone call. The ability to wait. Marcus, that same year, doubles his $50 to $100. He mentions it once, sideways, in a conversation about something else entirely. Not a confession, not a lesson learned, just a fact about his life now. No single crisis produced the doubling. It's the slow arithmetic of 2 years spent watching a friend's life get lighter while his own got heavier by degrees too small to notice one at a time. Then you're 30. There's no music here either. Endings don't announce themselves any more than beginnings do. You don't feel like a different species of person than the one who sat on the edge of a bed at 20, asking a question most people never think to ask. You still second-guess things. You still, some nights, wonder what a decade of easy yeses would have felt like, and you'll never know because you can't run the other version of your life to check. But you have something now that doesn't require an answer to that question. You have options nobody handed you and nobody can take back. A choice about which job to take instead of which job will take you. A number that isn't infinite, but is yours, built one boring, invisible, forgettable Tuesday at a time. Marcus is not ruined. He was never going to be. He's 32. Decent job, real friendships, a decade of genuinely lived experience that you, in your own way, quietly envy more than you'll ever say to him. He just has less space now to absorb being wrong, less room to wait, less room to choose slowly. That's the whole difference in the end. Not happiness, not virtue, room. Somewhere, a version of you is still 20, still sitting on the edge of that bed, still deciding to move $400 into an account with no name for a stranger he can't picture yet, the one reading this now, at 30, with room to move. That kid didn't know if you'd be worth it. You're still not completely sure either, but you're here, and you have room to move.